Hello, everyone, and welcome to Après Midi in Nice. It is really my pleasure to introduce Maître Carol Vangioni. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Uh-huh. Carol has been, and I say Carol even though formally she would be introduced as Maître Vangioni, because over the last few years we have developed a very close working relationship, which has really been to everyone's benefit, our benefit, all of our clients' benefit. And one of the reasons that we love Carol so much is not just because she's really a great notaire, but because she spent quite a lot of time in the U.S., in New York, I think, correct?
Correct.
And so her English is impeccable. But more importantly than that, she culturally understands us. And I can't tell you how important that is. In fact, that's the reason that we exist, is so that, because we're Americans, for Americans, by Americans, because we understand that crossing the cultural divide is the most difficult thing you do when you move to France. Does everybody agree with me on that, or am I just dreaming? Yep, everything else is kind of mechanical. They're the hurdles. But culturally speaking, we felt it was really important that our notaire understood what you guys were going through. So I'm going to let Carol talk, and she's going to talk today about the rights of succession, as in how we're leaving this stuff to our kids or our relatives and how much it's going to cost them.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Adrian, for your very kind introduction and for inviting me here to do this presentation here before you. So my name is Carol, as Adrian just introduced me. It's an honor here to speak with you today. I can see some familiar faces and some new faces. So today I have been speaking in the past about the purchase process of real estate in France. I think it has been quite informative for some of you. But I've come to realize over the years that there's even another matter that is very important, especially for foreigners like you that either live in France or come and go in the US and spend that time between the two countries. And me being an expat in the US for a few years, I can perfectly understand your position. And this is the topic of estate planning. So the subject of today is how to anticipate your succession in France. Okay, so I'm going to try to be quite pragmatic because I don't want to drown you with legal information. I have tried to do a synthesis of what I'm going to explain. And there is no one-size solution for everyone. Okay, so today I'm going to give you tools. I'm not going to go into details. Of course, each person is unique. Each person has its own personal circumstances on, personal tax aspects, civil aspects. So it's really for you what you will have to retain before leaving today is really understand the framework of what you will need to do, to protect yourself and your loved ones. Of course, at the end of this presentation, I will be answering your questions. I'll be happy to do so. So I'm going to start today, but before presenting the solution, what could happen if you do not anticipate, voilà, that's how to anticipate, that's the subject. So next, the key points I just explained now. So understanding as a foreigner how to anticipate your succession, and of course not overlooking all the solutions that are presented to you. Thank you, Adrian. Okay, the plan is, first of all, I want you to understand what happened as a matter of fact if you did not anticipate your succession. So I have come to a conclusion over the years that my foreign clients are very badly informed sometimes. They have purchased an asset in France and they have not even discussed with their notaire or their lawyer how they should protect themselves even before buying something. So I will discuss this matter. I will before tell you, so what happens if you don't you don't do anything and something happens to you in France, meaning you die in France and you have some assets in France. You can go next, Adrian. Voilà. Encore? Okay. So let's be pragmatic. You're here, you're American, you live in France habitually, okay? And you didn't put in place your will. In some cases, it could come as a surprise because if you are considered as a main resident in France and you didn't put something in place in France, well, you could be surprised because it would be the French law that could apply to your succession, okay? Meaning that it would not be the American law, because I guess everyone's American here, right? And
or Canadian,
or
or
Canadian, whatever. So it would not be your national law that will apply, but the French law. And the French law, it's called dying ab intestate, from the Latin word. You can go next. So the French law, in this map, you can see there is some fourth estate, because the children in France have a reserve of their share. It's not for you in your mind, in your American mind, to have the children inherit upon the first death of your spouse. But in France, it is compulsory. So the children, depending of if it's children from the same marriage or children from the outside marriage, they will have a share. It depends also of the number of children, and they will inherit a part of your succession. If there's no children, if you're just married and you don't have children, it could come also as a surprise, because as a matter of fact, the parents, as you can see, so défunt, that's the deceased, the parents could have an automatic share, and you could come into co-ownership with the parents of your husband that is deceased, which is not very comfortable sometimes. So this is very, very important to plan ahead, okay? If you did a will in the US, it might not be applicable in France. It might be applicable, but it might not be. And to avoid complication, it is better to plan ahead and have a system, a will, as for example, in France. But the will is not the only solution. We have other range of strategy to minimize the conflicts between the family and to reduce taxes. Not only is it complicated on a simple basis to be considering French estate planning, but also because we have to consider, as foreigner, that we have to take into consideration not only the French law, but also your national law, so US law, Canadian law, etc., etc. So before before going into details, we'll have to consider the conflict of law between both countries, the dual compliances that could happen if you don't do anything. Your heirs would have to go through all of this translation, legalization. Of course, it could be an increase of cost and a burden for your survivor, potential dispute, and complexity for foreigners, to find themselves in a foreign country and not having anything in place. So your target here is to target. Yeah, that's the tax actually. So this
you want me to go back?
Yes, please. One. Sorry, I'm just doing my notes. Okay. So this was on a civil point of view. Okay, that's what you want to avoid. All of this. I have a client. She's American. She bought an estate in France. Her husband died, and now we have to go and find a will in America, which is quite a headache because it's not the same law. We have to have it translated. Not mentioning that we don't know trust in France. We don't have trust. So your trust will not be applicable in France. And I know most of you have trust, so this is very important. So that's on a civil point of view. On a tax point of view, you want to anticipate death duties.
You want me to go on?
So these are, it looks quite a lot of tax, but
it is a lot of tax.
It is a lot
Carol.
of tax. So depending of the relationship you have with your heirs, they will pay taxes. The good news is that you don't have to pay tax between spouses. There's no tax, okay? In France, there's no tax.
As long as there's a will.
Even if there is no, as long as there's a will in France. The children, they have an allowance of 100,000 euros, and then their tax, as you can see here, ligne directe, it means direct inheritance, proportionally to the value of your estate. So it goes from 5 to 45%. That's for your children. If, as for example, you don't have children and it is your brother or your sister that is inheriting from you, the taxes are from 35 to 45%. If it is a niece, 55, and if it's someone that has no blood relation with you, it will be 60%. I have a lot of clients, this being said, that, you know, maybe sometimes they don't have children and they don't have brothers and sisters. Instead of giving to a stranger, they decide to give it into an association in France, and this, you pay no tax. So that's the good news. If you want to give to a charity,
so if you will all your assets to a French association, French
absolutely
non-profit org,
you
pay no tax. They pay no tax.
Absolutely.
Okay. What about a U.S. organization? A U.S. nonprofit?
I would have to check the convention between France and the U.S. So that might be more tricky. For sure in France. By the way, today I'm only speaking on the French legal side, okay? I'm not speaking for the US side. What I'm going to advise you is to do what you do in France and for your French asset. I'm not an American lawyer, so what is in America, your assets in America, you have to see with your lawyer in America, okay? And of course, I'm used to work with your lawyer in America, so with lawyers in America, so we can very well interact and discuss your particular case. Next, Adrian. So the target you will have on the stand here is to transmit your asset in France towards your wishes. So that's what you have to preserve. You want to preserve your family harmony, reduce inheritance tax, and avoid any headaches or complication with the French administration, which maybe you already know is a real headache. So
yeah.
So you want to avoid all of this for your heirs and for your spouse. So, and you want to understand how to organize your estate. So what can you do? Question one. So first of all, that's something that people forget to do, but you have to consider if you're married, of course, what is your matrimonial status? I have come to a conclusion that most of the people and the client I meet, they don't even know they're married. And for the people that are married or in partnership, they don't even know under what regime they are married. As a matter of fact, next, there are different matrimonial status in France. The matrimonial status is the communauté of assets, régime de la communauté réduite aux acquis. In France, everything you buy during the marriage is supposed to be common. Okay, I completely tell my client never to be submitted under this regime. When you're married, that's my point of view, depending of your situation, of course, because if you have a married couple and your wife is not working, you're not going to advise her to do a separation of assets because obviously she needs to be protected. Otherwise, I usually advise that you get married on the separation of assets. As a matter in the US, in all the states, you are automatically, if you didn't do a prenup, married on the separation of assets, except in some. I think there's 5 states,
California.
like California.
Yeah.
where you are under community of assets. So this is very important for you to know, because depending on what is your marriage status, your assets will be distributed in a different way. Okay, so it's very important in case of death, but also I have to say in case of divorce. Because if all the assets have been bought during the marriage under the name of your husband, and suddenly you divorce, you could have quite a surprise also. So, community of assets. Second regime is separation of assets. That's in France and in America. There's also the regime of universal community of assets. So you don't do this when you just get married. You really do it at the end of your life, when you have 40 years of marriage and you're sure that you are not, you're going to stay married, because you share everything, okay? Everything is in common. What you bought before the marriage, after the marriage, everything is common. It's a good regime for people, as for example, that don't have children. The other regime is the Participation aux acquis. That's an hybrid status that is used in Germany. During the marriage, you're married on the separation of asset, and after the marriage, community. In the same way for partnership, you have to consider if you're under a regime of co-ownership or community. It's exactly the same thing. So this legal matrimonial status will define the inheritance rights of the survivor, but also the tax benefits. So it is an important question. And in 2019, Adrian, there was a new regulation, which is very, very important, like for succession, I will talk later. And I think it's a big improvement, is that you can choose the law that will apply to your matrimonial status. This was impossible before, and sometimes it could be very complicated to determine which matrimonial status you're married under. For example, I have some clients, sometimes, they are American, English, whatever, and they have moved in different countries all over their life, living in Singapore, I don't know, Africa, whatever. So they move, and sometimes they have 10 residency. And in this case, in case of death, it's really complicated to understand what is their matrimonial status, knowing that if you're married after 92, between 92 and 2019, you can have an automatic change of matrimonial status. So you think you're married under separation of assets, and suddenly you move to France, you live in France more than 10 years, and automatically you are married under community of assets. So it is important to know when you got married before 92, it's a different rules. Between 92 and 2019, different rules, and after 2019. So what you can do to make sure that you are married, what is your situation, Adrian, is to check what is your the current law that applies to your marriage, first question. Second, do you need to review your contract, maybe, or your partnership agreement, to ensure that it reflects your current wishes and your circumstances, as well as make change if necessary to adapt to your new situations and dynamics. It is a very simple contract to do. In France, you just go before a notaire like me, and you elect your national law. So you're going to do a contract and say, actually, I'm certifying and I want the American law to apply to my marriage. So think about it, it's quite important. Second thing, Adrian, when you buy an asset in France. So I have discussed this in the past. What are the legal steps to buy a property in France? Today, I want to really speak about how to buy an asset in France. So first of all, before I go into the legal consideration, I want to really emphasize that when you look for a property in France, on the French Riviera in particular, you have to be really, really well advised, not only on the legal aspects, which this I can do, but also on a practical aspect, and you need to be accompanied. So I really highly recommend that you work with professionals, and I have to say that I've been a lawyer for a few years, numbers of years, and I meet a lot of real estate agency here that actually are really, to my opinion, most of the time not professional. So if you, first step, if you want to purchase something, I really recommend that you be accompanied by the group of Adrian Leeds, not only because they're very professional and they know perfectly the Paris market, the French market, but also because they will give you a real guidance, on all the step of the transaction, on the practical aspect, and they will not let you buy something that you're not supposed to buy. Okay, some agencies, they're going to bring you to an apartment and they're going to tell you, yeah, it's fine, and suddenly you're going to discover something that is really redibitory that you cannot buy. So that's the first advice, knowing that I'm here to advise you on a legal point of view. I'm not taking care of all the practical aspects. Okay, so that's what I wanted to let you know as an introduction. So when you buy a property, the first step is to sign a preliminary contract. And after you sign a preliminary contract, which I always, advise you to your best interest at this stage, we take the time after the signing, because there is a substitution clause in the compromis that allows you, if necessary, to buy through a structure. Okay, so how are we going to take consideration of what you're going to do to buy your property? Well, first of all, next, Adrian, as I said as an introduction, there is not one solution. It's really something that we have to think carefully, because once it's done, it's done. We have some clients with Ella and Jennifer actually that have been very badly advised. They went to a notaire, which is not specialized in with an international client, as well with an agency that was not specialized with international clients. They purchased an apartment. It was only 6 months ago, and suddenly they realized that they want to actually buy the property with their children. It was too late, because it's never too late, but at this stage they should have done it, from the beginning, to avoid more tax.
Carol, can you just go back and explain the clause de substitution a little bit clearer, so that everybody understands how that works?
So when you sign a compromis, which is the preliminary contract, it's the first contract of a real estate transaction. The compromis, you take the undertaking to buy and the vendor to sell you the property. In this compromis, I always, include a clause which is called une clause de substitution. In this clause, we're going to say, okay, we're signing the compromis here today, Mr. and Mrs. X, but actually we need time to think of how we're going to buy this property. Do we want to involve our children, etc.? So this clause allows you, for the final deed, to sign into a different name, a different company, or whatever is adapted to your situation. So it means that you don't have to stress about this before signing the compromis. You can do this. You have time. Usually after the signing of the compromis, we have 2 months, sometimes 3 months to think about it. The most important is that it's in place for the signing of the deed. The dog is very attentive. He's really, he's looking back.
Taking it all in.
Yeah. So, very important. There's many questions we have to consider. Are you married? Are you single? Are you in a partnership? What's your nationality? What's your tax residency? Where do you intend to live in the future? Are you going to stay in America and only use the property for secondary residence? Are you going to move to France? Definitely. Do you have children? What are your plans with the property? Are you intending to keep it long term, short term? This can define also some very important structure. Do you intend to rent the property long term, short term, very short term, like Airbnb? Well, I won't speak about Airbnb today. We were having this discussion today with Adrian, but as you know, it's quite regulated. What is your project? Are you intending to do a big renovation, a small renovation? Who do you want your property to go to in case something happens to you, etc., etc. So you can see there's a lot of question that needs to be addressed before we can say, okay, you will do this or that. So this, in a classical case, even with my French clients, I will ask them all of these questions. Okay, so I mean it's normal. You want to advise your clients to the best of the interest. But in your case, it's more complicated because not only do we have to answer this question and take them into consideration, but also we have to take care of your national law, meaning most American or Canadian, the UK law, and this complexifies, the decision that will be taken because we have to position ourselves on the French side, but also make sure that there will be no implication, mostly in terms of tax, on the American tax. You will understand that also I'm not going to advise a US national residing in France with children as a US living in Singapore who will be using the property punctually. In the same way, I'm not going to advise a US national who is unmarried and has no children. The target is absolutely not to complexify your situation, however. Sometimes you present me with your situation, it is easy, and I'm just going to go straight to the easiest solution, which might be as simple as a will. However, there are, on a civil aspect, it has to be carefully studied. Can you go next? Why is it important? So on a civil aspect, as I said, because you want to anticipate the results. And also on a tax point of view. Why? Because there's taxes in France, unfortunately, as you know. And when you buy something, you always have to think of the present and the future. The present is which tax, which registration tax you're going to pay. So normally, unless you're a marchand bien, unless you're a professional of real estate, the registration tax are going to be the same if you buy through as an individual or through a civil company. Most importantly, the capital gain tax. Which tax are you going to pay if you resell? Depending, I'm not going to give you a speech about capital gain tax because it's quite complicated, but what you need to know is that the longer you keep the asset, the less tax you pay. Inheritance tax, depending on your structure, your heirs might be affected by the tax they'll have to pay. IFI, wealth tax. That's if you're above a certain, if the value of your asset is above a certain value, you have to pay wealth tax, which is called impôt de solidarité sur la fortune. 3% tax, that's really a tax that is for a foreign company, so that's really an exception. And then the rental income tax, because when you rent your property, you need to know what tax you are going to pay, depending if you're renting furnished, unfurnished, etc. So there's a lot of consideration to think ahead before choosing your structure. And what are the structure you can use, Adrian? So buying as an individual, it's simple, you buy alone or with your husband. Buying in joint ownership, so it means you'll be in co-ownership with someone. Co-ownership, sometimes it could have some inconvenience. You're buying with your brother or your sisters, you have to make sure that you all agree on each other, because you binded, meaning you cannot take any decision without your co-owner. In France, if you do not agree with your co-owner, you have to go in front of a judge for him to take the decision in your place. Purchasing through a civil company. So I don't know, maybe you have heard of SCI, Société Civile Immobilière. It's a civil company. So it's not a tax tool, it's more a transmission tool. You can buy with, we can set up some article of association for you to buy through a company, as for example, if you have children. And it's a quite efficient tool, because you can decide, you can continue to take the decision if you are the director of the company, and transmit to your children the shares, which could be in some cases quite tax efficient, especially if you have a mortgage. So this is something to be considered. In some case, I will advise some of my clients to do also a Monaco SCI, which is a Monaco French company. There's a lot of advantages to be in Monaco, but it depends, of course, of the value of the property, because it doesn't come with inconvenience to set up a Monaco SCI, but it's very efficient if you're buying a high value property to think about this. And the last thing is this membership. So in France, we have this fiction of law, which actually divide the property into usufruct, which is called usufruit. I don't know if some of you have heard about this, which is the right to use the property, and what we call the freehold. I will get back to this in a moment when I speak about donations. So these are the main tools. So the target, as we say,
you want me to move on? I have one question on this, though,
Yes.
before we move on. What's not listed here is U.S. or foreign corporation.
Yes. Thank you for asking this, Adrian. In general, I completely advise my client not to buy through a commercial company, because there's massive impact in terms of capital gain tax. But except if on the model of Adrian, if you're buying shares, if it's an American company that is, it's a timeshare, right?
No, it's a fractional.
A fractional share. This is the exception, as absolutely.
Right. So in this case, our fractional ownership properties are purchased in the name of a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation.
Yes.
So it's a U.S. corporation, and that enables the shares to be bought and sold on the U.S. side without going back through the French system, which the French don't like, but that's the way it is, right?
Yeah.
But we determined early on that it's very rare for the owners who have to unanimously agree to sell the property. I've never seen that happen. I've never seen a property sold in its entirety that was a fractional, which is why we do it that way.
Neither did I, yeah. Absolutely. And this company is actually is never going to sell the asset as a company. It will always be the shares that will be sold, and the taxation will be in America. So this is really the exception.
Right.
Okay, so we've seen, so the target in terms of the practical steps, in terms of buying a property in France is first recommendation, think ahead. Consider your goals, your needs, and review the different structure. Plan for life changes, and always, as usual, consider not only civil implication, but tax consequences. The other thing you can do is to do a donation. So sometimes, you know, you buy an asset, you're in your 50s or in your 60s, and when you come and see me, you tell me, no, Carol, I don't want to involve my children at this stage of my life. I just want to buy the property myself. So in this case, you buy in your name. And a few years later, some people come and see me and says, oh, actually, our circumstances have changed. I would like now to involve my children in the ownership of my apartment in Nice, for example. So what can you do? it is absolutely possible to do what we call a donation. A donation is a gift that you do in France of your asset, of your real estate in France. So you can give money in France up to 31,000 euros with no tax, but you can also give your asset if you had not structure when you purchase. There's two kind of donation. A simple donation, so that's very straightforward. You have one kid, you have one asset, you give him your property. And the second donation, type of donation in France, is the donation partage. This is more complex. You have 3 children, you have different assets. We're going to give the property to your children, but we're going also to organize the split among themselves. That's really good, actually, because it avoids conflicts between children. If you have children, you know, sometimes, I mean, as a lawyer, I can let you know there's a lot of conflicts in terms of succession. And this, at least, is done, and there's no discussion. When you die, it has already been split. So there's no yes.
Are there still inheritance taxes if you've given it as a donation?
Good question. I'm going to give you some concrete example in 1 minute. So what can be given? You can give vehicle, jewelry, whatever you want. And as you very rightly said, when there's donation, what are the taxes? Next. So I provide you with some concrete example because I think this is more speaking to you. John and Susan are married, but yeah, they have 2 children, Tony and Mike. Okay. When they purchased the apartment, these people, they didn't do any, they just bought themselves. They're planning now to give the apartment to their children.
It has its own mind. I don't know why it does that.
And the value of the property is 400,000 euros. Okay, it's price, that's the normal price for, as for example, an apartment in Nice. Well, what you need to know is that the taxable plate is 400 euros because the taxable plate is the value of the property on the day you die. Okay, that's something you have to keep in mind because something you buy 300 euros now, with the price only going up in the only from your article today, everywhere in France, but in Nice, you have to consider that the value today might not be the value in 5 years. Whatever. Let's say to stick with our example that it's 400,000 euro. You can give 100,000 euro to each of your children, and each parent can give 100,000 euro, which means that you can give this apartment with absolutely no tax, which is very good.
Unless there's just you.
Unless you just have one kid.
And one parent.
Well, and one parent,
yeah.
Yes. But, good question again. Following your example, Adrian, there's so I'm getting back on this membership to reduce even more taxes, donation or even dev duties. You can do this membership. So I know for you it's a very strange notion, but in France, the full property is composed of the usufruct. In Latin, we say usus, the right to use something, and the abusus in Latin, meaning the right to, it's a freehold, okay? This and this, as it's very well here materialized in the puzzle, form the full property. Next tool, Adrian. This usufruct, so you can stop me if you don't understand, because it's quite technical. You can give the freehold of your property and keep the usufruct, okay? This is very efficient on a civil point of view and a tax point of view. Why? On a civil point of view, you're going to be able to keep the control of your asset, meaning you tell your kid, okay, I'm giving you this apartment, but I want to keep control on it. If you get married, I don't want this apartment to go to your husband. I don't want, I want to have a right of, what you can do and not do. And the usufruct, it means that your kid cannot take any decision without you. So that's good. On a tax point of view now, it's very mathematic. Huh? The value of the usufruct and the freehold is determined by your age. So let's take the example that you're less than 71. Your usufruct is 40%, and your right of your freehold is 60%. There's no discussion about this. It's in the French Civil Code. Okay, with the government said, okay, if you're this age, the value of your usufruct is as it is. So the importance of this is that if you do a donation, let's say you are less than 71, you're going to give to your kids 60% of the value of the property, and you'll be taxed only on this. Okay? It means that the 40%, you're keeping the usufruct in the value of 40%, and you won't be taxed on this. And the beauty of this, if I can say, is that when you die, the usufruct dies with its owner. It means that there will be no death duties. So you will have given, next example, Adrian, your property in advance to your kid with the 100,000 allowance, which is still applicable, plus the exoneration of tax on the usufruct. Well, of course, this is quite a complicated matter, so I can explain you this.
Super complicated.
Well, so let's take John and Susan again. They're married, they're 68 years old. Okay, they have 2 children. The same way, they didn't think ahead, and they come and they tell me, Carol, I want to give my apartment to my kids, but I don't want them to do n'importe quoi. Hein, we say in France. I want them to. I want to keep control. The value of the property is 800,000. In this case, the usufruct, because they're less than 71, is valued 320,000 euro, and the freehold 480. 480 plus 320, it's 800. So each children in the same way have an allowance of 400,000 euros, which means that to give an asset of 80,000 euros, since you're not taxed on the 320 plus 400, okay, you will only be taxed, they will only be taxed up to 80,000 euros. You can imagine that's a big difference, that if you wait until you die, because they will pay full cost. Okay, they'll still have the allowance of 100,000, but they will, if it's not anticipated, you will lose the benefit of this part of the tax. Not mentioning that in the same way, it is done. You know, there will be no administrative paper, no succession to do. You won't have to go and see a notaire and say, okay, let's split my your heirs. Of course, you'll be dead, huh? But your heirs will not have to go and see a notaire in France and say, okay, let's do the succession. It will be done. So the paperwork will be done, as well as the tax consideration.
We're not considering the U.S. side, right?
That's French. But in the US, there's no taxes. You can give to your children. I mean, there's taxes, but to high levels. And it will not be taxable in the US.
The step-up in basis that you would normally get?
Sorry?
The step-up in basis that you would normally get in the US?
What is the...
I don't know. I don't understand your question either.
Well, normally when you die, you get a step-up in basis, right? So the capital gains is...
No, there's no capital gain when you die in France.
In the US as well?
In the US, I don't know. You'll have to consider the
On
US
an
side.
inheritance?
But what is
Not a
sure...
sale.
What is sure is that there's a convention between France and America, and there's a tax treaty. So what you pay in France, you don't pay in America. Okay? Yes?
You said for this membership, it takes the value of the date you perform this transaction.
Yes.
So if there's any further increase, then it stays.
Yes, absolutely. It's done. It's done on the day we sign the donation. It's an authentic deed that is done before me. It's done. It's even if the property increase, it's a very good remark that you're saying, because indeed, if you do it, let's say in 2024, for 800,000, if when you die the property is 1.5, it doesn't matter. Good question. No capital gain tax and no additional tax because of the increase of value. Okay?
Are the are the children required to pay for any maintenance or improvements on the property once this is set up?
Very good question also.
That depends on the parent.
That depends on the parents, but the law says, if you want to come back on the puzzle, Adrian, l'usufruitier before, l'usufruitier, vas-y, encore.
Oh, encore?
The puzzle, voilà. The holder of the usufruct, which is the usufruitier, usually the parents, he's supposed to pay for the common expenses, okay, the current maintenance in a building, condo charge, etc. He's supposed also, if the property is rented, to get the income. And the nu propriétaire, the holder of the freehold, will pay for the heavy work. Okay, you have the condo has voted for structural work in the building. Normally it is split like this, but of course all of this is conventional also. You know, there's not only the French civil code. You can find a different agreement. It's written in the contract, whatever you decide.
It's
Voilà.
a deal between you and your kids,
Yes.
basically.
Well, the reason I asked is I was told that if you had a situation where the parents were paying for these costs, especially if there were improvements rather than maintenance, then this could argue that the children weren't really the owners of the property because as owners they're supposed to pay for those costs, and therefore there was a risk of the structure collapsing if the parents weren't paying for it.
Meaning?
Well, I guess that's if you make your kids pay for it. I mean, it depends on.
If you do your say, it's wonderful if you don't, I run risk.
From the kids suing you?
No, from the kids saying this wasn't the real deal.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean.
Oh.
You mean a donation déguisée? No, we're not in the case of a hidden donation here. No, absolutely not.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. No, a donation déguisée is when instead of doing a donation, like I just said, you sell the property to your kids because you only pay 5% tax, 6% tax when you sell something instead of paying the donation rights. So this is indeed a tax fraud. Otherwise, no, not in this case. So and
it's not the date of death, it's the date of the attestation of the contract. So
yes,
like 20 years later, the tax is based on the original.
Absolutely, the tax has been paid. It's over.
So you know, I wrote about this because I transferred the title of my Paris apartment to my daughter last year before I turned 71.
Absolutely.
In order to take advantage of that part of it, but I also took advantage of the structural problems in my apartment because the value of the property was quite a bit less because of the structural issues. And therefore, it was advantageous to make the transfer over. So, of course, I'm paying for everything that's happening in the property, okay? I mean, my daughter's not paying for anything. But, you know, however many years down the road when I pass, it'll be hers at 100%, and she'll have no inheritance tax. Now, it was not cheap.
Yeah.
Okay, but it was a hell of a lot less expensive.
Yeah.
About 1/10 of what it would have been.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And for her, because now she has no
tax. One child, of course, you have less allowance because it's 100,000 per child.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned the condo fees and such should be with the usufruit.
Yeah,
but
usufruitier.
If there's major structural issues,
cost. Yeah.
Are the new propriétaires supposed to be the ones who are signing off on the?
Yes, who's supposed towards the French civil code, the code, they're supposed to pay for the heavy work. But once again, that's conventional. we can very well arrange something different in the contract, in the donation contract.
Yeah, for example, if my daughter's 23 and
And
have
she
to
has
drop
no
her, like, she has
salary,
no money, I mean,
absolutely.
like,
You're not going to expect, exactly, I'm not going to expect my daughter to come up with any of it.
right.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the whole point of making it free for them anyway, right?
But we need to come and get another
So, but
contract.
that would be, is that written into?
No,
That's
no.
what she's
It's
saying.
written from
She
the
writes it.
beginning in the contract. We organize the split. What do you want? It's tailored to your situation. It's not like a standard, a sample. Okay, we're going to say, if you tell me, okay, I want to make sure that if something happens to my daughter or my son, I want the asset to come back to me in my estate. Yes, I can organize this. I want to make sure it doesn't go in. It doesn't go to her husband. I want to pay, actually, my daughter is not working. I want to pay for everything that is related to this property. You can organize and define this in the contract itself, that there is no
Excuse me, Carol.
yes.
When is this done? Is this done at the time you purchase or later? Or
That's
when you're making
the donation. That's in the case that you bought a property. Okay, you're already the owner of a property. You bought a property 5 years ago. At that time, you wanted to be the sole owner. And with time, you think you're getting old and you want your children to pay the less tax possible. You come back later in your life and you say, you know what, now it's different and I want to do this donation. It's just to tell you from the beginning, I was telling you it's important to think ahead. Okay, so to structure from the beginning to avoid double cost. Okay, when you structure from the beginning, you don't have to come back because when you do something else, you have to repay, of course, registration tax. But sometimes it's easy to say, you don't know what happens in life. It tells you that you have the possibility, the option to change. It's not frozen in time, okay, or in marble. You can change things by doing a donation. And the donation, it's different as a will. Donation you give when you live. A will you give after you die. It's not the same thing. Yes.
What do you recommend for the Americans who have a trust and who are moving to France?
Alors, I will never.
Yeah, repeat the question.
Yes, American having a trust in the US, what you can do in France? Well, I'm absolutely incompetent about trust. I mean, I know about trust. I worked in a law firm in the US, so I know what a trust is. But as a French lawyer, we're not supposed even to know what is a trust. Because it's a notion that it does not exist in French law. So the trust, and of course, I recommend whatever you do, do never buy a French estate with a trust, by the way. So it's really an American question. The trust is in America, and it does not concern, I cannot advise you on this. I think you have a very competent...
Jonathan Hadida,
Voilà.
yeah, tax advisor.
Tax advisor. He'll be. He has both nationality, or he's a friend. He knows
Don't
both.
do it, basically. Don't have a trust.
Right, basically,
don't even talk
life
about
with a
your trust in your will. Okay, so that's why I'm coming. Good. I'm going to talk about your wills. Fifth thing you can do, Adrian, on this. So practical step, just to conclude on the donation. Consider your goals. Choose the right type of donation. And always be aware of the civil and tax implication. So this is just a parenthesis, okay? I'm not a banker, I'm not a financial advisor, but I have to tell you, taking a life insurance in France, putting some money in a life insurance, it has some tax advantages depending on when you subscribe the contract, okay? How much money there is, etc. It's in some cases exonerated of death duties. So if you have some cash in France, you can think about this. But this, you have to consult a banker. Okay, Adrian. So now wills. So that's the minimum you can do. Okay, if you don't, if you have not thought ahead. If you have not done a donation, at least do a will, okay? That is very, very important. So having a will in France is a choice that you can that you have. Well, you always could do a will in France, but in 2015 there was a very, very important law which now allows you to choose the law that applies to your succession. Before, you had an asset in France, and depending of your country of residency, it would be the French law that would apply to your asset, meaning that you didn't have a choice. You would have to inherit with your children, as I said earlier, because the children have a reserve on the estate. Imagine you live in France, as I said when I started this speech. You are a French resident, you don't have a will, so your children will automatically inherit. You can avoid this very easily. You can have a will, and in this will, you have what we call a professio juris in Latin, meaning that you choose the law that will apply to your succession. I can help you with this, of course. It's really not a complicated matter. We have different type of will. Most of the time, unless there's a conflict, you tell me I have a major conflict with my family, it might be a mess when I die, I will advise you to do an authentic will, which has a power of not being contestable. Otherwise, in simple situation, it's called a will holographe. It's a handwritten will. You come in my office and you handwrite your will, and you're going to say, okay, and it's only for your French asset. Okay, I really recommend that you have a will in France and in America. It cannot, and that both wills do not are really split. One will for the French asset and one will for the American side. Because why? If you have a will in America, it's going to be a mess, to go and find a will in America, have it translated, see if it's applicable in France towards the French laws, the form of the will. We're going to have to think about this. If you have a will in France, it's very efficient because we have a central database. And when we receive a will, when someone does a will, we register it with a central database, which is electronic for all the notaires. And when someone dies, it is compulsory. It's a legal requirement that we question this database. So your will be retrieved automatically. And it will be applied for your French asset, which means that it will be really split between the French civil and the American or English laws. So you can, of course, in your will write whatever you want. Where do you want who do you want your real estate to go to? Your bank account, your personal funds, etc., etc. And not only do you have to do it for after the death of your spouse if you're married, but also after the death of the second spouse. So this is very important because with this will, you're going to elect your law, and you're going to be able to make sure, because most of the time that's what people want, that it goes to the survivor. Okay, survivor meaning with no tax and nothing, not the children involved. And then you state that upon the second death, yes, you want X and Y or your children to inherit. Okay, very important to have the professio juris and the election of law in the will, because otherwise the will is not even applicable. You really have to make sure, because I've seen some will that have been written really badly, and if something happens, I'm not sure we'll be able to enforce it. So it's really really important to be advised correctly. Of course, the will, it's not if you write a will today, you can change it, okay? You can do 10 wills if you want. It's not if you change your mind, you can come back and do another will. Voilà, so that's for the wills. How is the will retrieve? So the last thing I wanted to tell you, I will not discuss this today, but there's also something that is not well known among foreigners, is that I know you have it in America, but you can do a living will also in France. That's important. It's called un mandat de protection future, meaning not thinking only upon of other people, your heirs, whatever. You have to think also of yourselves, and make sure you live in France. You're in a foreign country. If you have a living will in the US, it might be complicated. In case something happened and you're incapable, you're unable to manage your asset, to have this in place also. So this, I did not write it here, but of course it's something that you have to keep in mind and do if you want to. It's managing your asset, what you want, who do you want to take care of you if something happens. You're here. You're alone, so very important. Okay, voilà. I think for me it's finished. Do people have? Do you have any questions or? Yes.
First of all, if I'm unmarried, not a tax resident,
Yes.
and so I have one property, so I don't need to say anything about what's in the U.S. That follows the American.
No, I don't suggest you do this. I suggest that we don't refer to an American will because it will complexify. It's the same thing that going to get a will in the US. Your will in France has to be clear and states, okay, for my apartment in France, something happens to me, I want it to go to X.
Now, what happens if you write that will and later, after you die, you sell it?
Well, the will is automatically void. So if you don't have anything, except your bank account, maybe it will apply to your bank account, your car, or whatever you have. Voilà. Yes.
Are the notary fees set by regulation by government or the individual? What is a typical simple will like this?
Simple. It depends of the complexity, but it's between 300-400 per will, depending of how long it takes to draft it or your situation, etc. And it's for the donation. To answer your question, yes, indeed, the legal costs are regulated in the same way as for real estate by the French government. So it's proportional to the value, to the given value. Yes.
Two questions, if I may. When you talk about having a will in accordance with the laws of different countries, if France passed a law saying you couldn't do that?
Sorry?
You said you can have a will drawn by reference to the laws of different countries.
No, you have to have your will in France, okay? But in your will, you're going to say, I want the American law, because it can only be your national law that you choose.
But isn't there a law in France that says you cannot do that?
No, because it's
no,
because actually it is a European law that states this. C'est le règlement européen, which is applicable to France and all the countries in Europe.
I can read it was a dispute between France and the European Union.
Yes. No, it is applicable, absolutely.
Okay, and my second question is, with the recent election result, you have the left-wing parties talking about increasing the level of inheritance tax.
With the election in France?
Yes.
Well, we're in the dark right now.
No, I understand that. My question is, how do you plan when that happens? Do you wait to see what happens? Or do you adopt it?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I don't think they're going to increase. That's my sole opinion, okay? Not as a lawyer, as an individual. I don't think they will increase now the death duties, because it will be very unpopular. This death duty tax is already unpopular, so I don't think they'll change, but I cannot presume of the future. Maybe in the future they will reduce the 100,000 allowance, to 50. I don't know, but it hasn't changed in a long time. I forgot to say something important is that this 100,000 allowance, you can give it every 15 years. So it's not a one time in your life. Meaning you can, for example, give half of your apartment with the maximum allowance authorized, and then give another half 15 years later. But for now, yes, it is as it is. We don't know. Already, you know, there's no death duties with the survivor, so it's already a benefit. Yes, Patty?
Can the donation be given to somebody other than children?
Yes, absolutely. But of course, the tax, it's my first, the tax is, if there is a taxable amount remaining after the allowance, if you give to someone you don't know, there's no allowance. Normally, it's going to be a very small allowance, and the tax is going to depend on your relation with the donateur, the one that received the gift. If it's someone you don't know, it's 60%. So, but you can keep the usufruct. But this has to be someone you really know. Because you want to avoid problems.
I heard you say, my question is the one to refer to the U.S. in my will, but that's an question you said something about doing that.
No, not referring to your will, but to elect the law of America to your will. Meaning that in America, you can, maybe, sorry, it was not clear. Indeed, in America, you can give your assets to whoever you want, okay? Meaning to your spouse.
Or even Molly.
Exactly. Even, yeah, exactly. But so if you elect this law, it means you have complete freedom. And if you're married, indeed, if you choose your law, and you can give to your spouse without having to give to your children if you submit it to French law.
And when I was talking to you earlier, you talked about when I developed a French will, it has nothing to do with when, beforehand or after you were arrived in America, right?
Sorry?
Does the timing of when you execute a French will is unrelated to?
No. In France, yeah, that's a good question. The succession, if you didn't do a donation, it has to be filed within 1 year after your death. Meaning if there's tax duties, they have to file, it has to be filed with the tax authority 1 year after your death. It's 6 months for French resident. And if you're French resident, actually it's 6 months. But non-resident, it's 1 year. Otherwise, there's penalties.
But for who? If you're dead, the penalties are for the heirs.
For your heirs, absolutely.
Carol, can you clarify what you, again, sorry, this just wasn't clear for me. When people are, the usufruct pay for charges, condo charges, but if there are major repairs to be done in the apartment, does there need to be a signature from the new propriétaire somewhere that they're paying for it?
It's written in the contract. You can keep track of the expense you do during the life of the property. But as I said, everything is set up in the contract.
But if it wasn't, I mean, or
well, it's impossible. It wasn't.
So it was. So what I'm saying is, like, does Erica sign off on the bills of the repair work that you're doing in Paris?
No, because I set it up that I pay for everything.
Yeah.
I set it up so she has no liability.
So
but then it's not a question of it's also a question of
relationship.
So at the end of life, though, would there be a question of who owns it if the new propriétaire didn't sign off on payments for major repair work?
No, it's this you're talking about accounts. I'm talking about property and transfer of property. The maintenance, this you have to see, and with an accountant how it's split, and it has to be split towards what has been written in the contract. Okay, but then it's a question of agreement between the donateur and the donataire. Voilà. So thank you for your attention and for being here today.
Thank you, Carol, very, very
welcome,
much.
you're welcome.
Before Carol leaves, I just would like to thank her for this, but also when you this is complicated, okay?
Yeah.
The main thing is when you're buying a property, if you haven't already, then you want to think about this before you sign the final act de vente. You need to plan ahead. Number one. Okay, and then if you've already purchased property, then now's a good time to speak with Carol to work out what's the best way to transfer, if you want to do that, if you want to transfer it to your kids now or not. I mean, let's face it, you're going to be dead, maybe you don't care, okay? You know, honestly, they're gonna inherit a property and they're gonna end up selling it in order to pay the tax. So it's really a decision that you make yourself on how to handle this.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And in order to find Carol, you just have to. Well, it'll be on the website. It'll be in the newsletter on Monday, and of course, you can always come to us and we can connect you. Okay. So you can hang out here as long as you like. Do not forget to pay for your drinks and whatever. Okay. And we will see you in 2 months' time. In September. What's the date, Patty? Do you know offhand? Last Thursday of the month? And Brian Dunhill with Dunhill Financial is going to be speaking. There you go, September 26th. So put it in your calendar. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.